take the lower 6 out, and how the healing will take place? No. So what do you do? Lower right 6 removal.
Take an X-ray and see if it's
Okay, X-ray done. And
it's
it's slightly curved. That's it.
It's just the risk assessment.
mobile, mobility, circumstances.
No, it's firm, slightly curved roots.
As the patient, how long they've been taking for, and is there any
And the
associated?
bone will be more brittle.
It's just about the healing, actually.
Yeah. So would you do the extraction or would you refer? That's one of my questions.
I will do it.
I would do it if they're progress.
If you refer, you know the hospital what they will say?
Can be done with surgery.
No, they should. The consultants are really writing letters nowadays that you should know the guidelines.
Yeah.
Do you know the guidelines? Do you know the guidelines?
No.
That's what I'm saying. You don't know the guidelines. That's why somebody is saying, I will extract. Somebody is saying, I will not. I will refer. Because you don't know the guidelines. Tasso is right. Take it out. Oral bisphosphonates should be done in your primary care.
There's no risk.
I didn't say that.
There is risk.
I didn't say that.
It's the same amount of risk that they will have.
Yeah.
It's the same risk if you follow the protocols.
Exactly.
They
They
don't
will
heal.
blame you
When they come back,
afterwards.
they don't heal. They just have
So much better to take it out.
Yeah. So, oral bisphosphonate, you take it out. Oral bisphosphonate, you going to place an implant or not?
If
Now
it's
if
starting,
you-
then you could place an implant.
There you are. Salman got the answer. If you're extracting, what's different with the implant?
Exactly, yeah.
Nowadays,
Will you do it at the same
Can
time?
we place, can we do bone graft?
yes,
The same,
the same oral bisphosphonate.
You need to be more careful, put it this way, right? And again, as we were talking about, start from simpler cases, but yes, you need to be more careful, you need to be cautious. It
They
is
have to
possible.
have the guidelines. I think guidelines would be an important part to look at first.
Yes, you need to know the guidelines. That's
And it is an
absolutely right.
elective procedure,
Which is the
so that's another thing.
Huh?
Which is the best place to look at for this?
I'll give it to you. Just message me, I'll give it to you.
We'll put it on the WhatsApp.
Yeah, WhatsApp group, I'll put that on the WhatsApp. But, yes, so iron bisphosphonate, you refer, oral bisphosphonates you do. But it doesn't mean that there is no risk, which means that you need to go through your patients with
This risk.
this risk. You need to tell them. You need to document it, you put down in the notes, they should be told, and that is what you can do. You know what, nowadays, what did I say bisphosphonate do?
Decrease the osteoclastic activity.
So what the people are doing now, they are coating implants with bisphosphonates.
very clever, yeah.
Decrease osteoclastic activity, coat it with implants,
Like which type of coating would do that?
bisphosphonate coating, that's it.
Medication hill.
So are there any plants? And
Yeah.
They have-
Yeah, there are studies, there are studies, there are
Wow.
studies.
Okay.
Yeah, clever, isn't it?
Clever,
Yeah, very good. So everybody clear about bisphosphonate, bone turnover, what's there, BONJ, everything is clear. Okay?
But if they decrease the osteoclastic activity, won't that interfere with the recontouring of the bone around
No,
the
but it's only around the implant. It's around that 2 millimeters of implant. 2-3 millimeters of implant. That's like your bundle bone. Don't tell me now what do you don't know what bundle bone is. That's not that's like your bundle bone. Okay? That's bisphosphonate. Sorry.
Yeah. So it is important, of course, but the point being, with bisphosphonates, being still careful and cautious about it, the very fact it is an elective procedure must not be forgotten. Right? So it is an elective procedure. When it comes to extraction, you've got to do it. You've got to do it because patient is in need of that, or in need of implants. So you have to justify that. You have to be cautious, especially if things go wrong. But yes, especially with the coding nowadays, making a big difference. You do all this before you start considering placing the implants. So this should be in your notes, right? You should have gone through all the assessment, facial proportions, symmetry, any smile line issues, whether they have got high lip line or not, skeletal classification, so this should be again in your notes. What's the relationship of the jaws, angle classification, right? And the GMG assessment if there are any issues. So you should have ruled them all out. Wear is one issue that you will come across quite a lot in these patients, occlusal wear, which is reflected in how the patient is biting and eventually the occlusion is affected. So many of our implant patients, they will be first addressed for wear.
So like you got one point in the existing process, the wearing attention, partial attention or something. What about that we should be careful about?
With the occlusal wear, you mean?
No, with the existing process, suppose they've got the wearing attention.
If
What
there's
should we look into that?
Well, they may have some periodontal problems, they may have, you have to look into all these issues that are there. So what do you think would be the issues with it, with the denture? One, they are not happy problem. What are the issues you will face?
You know, it can be causing stripping of gums
Yeah.
around the other teeth.
Okay. So that is
Most
periodontal issues,
most-
throat retention, yes. What are the issues you will
It's
face?
a progressive bone loss under the denture as well.
Yeah. Ill-fitting denture. Or the patient compliance maybe, there's another factor.
But if the patient keeps on wearing the denture, will he be losing bone more progressively?
Usually that, yeah, we cannot rule that out. There's a lot of factors associated why. If it is properly done and the patient compliance is there, then you would expect that the bone loss should be physiological rather than pathological, right? So you shouldn't have excessive bone loss. But yes, many dentures, patient compliance and all those things, they will play a role. So
What if they're happy with that?
Well, then selective procedure, if they want to stay with it, they can stay with it.
No, but if they're happy with that, if they're happy with the shape, size, but they're not happy with the retention,
That's when you can make it implant.
that's your guide, that's your stent for your new prosthesis.
it's a good probation. Right? So it tends to help with the soft tissue as well. We come into soft tissue now, I think. Yeah. So which one is going to be difficult and which is going to be easy for you?
Attached, recognized tissue.
Yeah. So you do not want to go towards, well, try to, of course you will have to, but initially try to find cases which do not have high lip line, thin mucosa, and it's not very keratinized, so you will be struggling there because there will be more reception. If it is thick keratinized tissue, then you are in a safe zone. Right?
Is biotype the alternative name for keratinized tissue? Biotype.
Biotype, yes, so you judge the biotype.
Same name, different names.
Yes, so you have to judge the biotype, whether it is thick or thin, right? But we're talking about soft tissue. Right? Yeah.
Ask them how would they evaluate the biotype.
Let's have a look at the pictures that's going to help, isn't it?
How will you evaluate biotype?
I think you would be.
Probe and basically a little bit of aesthetic, see the movement with a probe, how thick the gums are, feeling them clinically basically.
Clinically, how? What's the difference between keratinized and non-keratinized mucosa?
It's the amount of stippling,
And?
they feel spongy on that basically.
The keratinized means the half of the how thicker the.
Which one is keratinized mucosa? Which you have?
What is keratinized mucosa? Let's start with that.
Which is attached to the bone.
Okay, they are getting closer. So what is non-keratinized?
The one which is just below the the collar around the tooth. That's the non-keratinized.
Mobile and immobile.
Well, mobile is not
Which one is immobile?
attached.
Keratinized. Which is immobile? Which is mobile? Not keratinized. So how do you judge? How do you evaluate? Just put a probe, put the probe in the buccal sulcus, push it up. If it moves, it's non-keratinized. If it doesn't move, it's keratinized. Simple as that.
And this is how you differentiate between the thick and the thin biotype.
You can.
This is
you
one
put-
of the aspects.
Yes.
Second is a scalloping.
Yes, scalloping.
Clamping that, okay.
Yeah.
So you can see, it's quite, these photographs are pretty specific. They tend to help quite a lot to understand. It's just that the pictures quality is a bit poor.
The second part and the third test is Just put your probe underneath the clavicular surface. Put your perineal probe around your tooth. These are the things I will tell you about. Then ethnicity will tell you whether the patient has got which biotype. The ethnicity will tell you. Then the previous surgery will tell you if there has been a previous surgery in there. That will tell you. So these are all the things how you evaluate but make sure that you have to document the biotype in your notes at consultation appointment. That is very important. As with that said, lip line, everything has to be documented in your notes.
Everything has to be documented, yes. You haven't documented, you haven't done it, you have to look for it. So, thick biotype will make it easier for you to mask the color of the implant abutment junction. Right? And of course, thick biotype will have less tendency to recede. You'll be able to mold it better, you'll be able to control better. But then, when it comes to surgical incisions, you have to be, again, keeping that in mind. Mobility is what you're looking at when it comes to grafts, especially bone grafts. So you can see the scalloping. You see this right here. That is quite a clear indication that you've got long scallops. Invert type, and it's going to be more difficult to address. Things that you have to again note down. How do we measure bone density? How do we check for it? How do we look for it?
Only on the X-ray.
How do you judge that? Now, of course, this one is the CTCD and Lek-Hohmann-Zerbe, right? So their classification, you can follow the Von-Skid units and start measuring that. But when you're starting a case, you'll be relying on a periapical more or less, right? So how will you judge that?
So the bone cause the color of the.
But periapical, you need to have a reference point, isn't it? What's the reference point? A step wedge is a good approach to go for.
Step wedge.
Aluminium step wedge. Let's go for that. Yeah, here we go. Can you see that? Again, the quality is a bit of an issue, but it is a good guide. If you're taking X-rays with the step wedge, you should be able to step wedge. So it's got steps in it. Right?
Okay.
So just take and then slowly get in cancelled. You have a guide to help you.
You can just get it from the market, yeah?
Yeah.
Like from the dental.
Dental suppliers.
So the middle one, how does it, more white or it is more sensitive?
So which one you are aiming for? Like
How do you attach it to your X-ray? Like it's like a stick, like
Just keep
X-ray
it
holder.
We'll show you. We'll show you as we go through the course. We'll show that as we go down. Because otherwise we'll be just discussing that aspect. But I need you to be taking these things seriously, right? So these things are important. That you go through these steps, which are, I know, a bit boring, but you have to go through these things. If you don't do
this one.
all these steps, right? You've been going through these boring steps, but
You'll give us the printout for it.
it can be given. Yeah, that's not a problem. Diagnostic wax-up. Do we do that? How do we do that?
Digital.
That's really good, but yeah, how do we do regional?
The lab guy does it and he just shares the screen and you can see it.
How do you measure it regional? There are a few different ways. I'm just asking which one are you using?
I think there is this, I'm not sure the name of the software, but I think I've heard it's expensive, so the lab does it, they do everything, they just share the screen and then.
The lab cannot do everything. You have to have the reference points for the diagnostic wax-up. Diagnostic wax-up will mean that you have to have the relationship of the maxilla to the joint.
Yeah.
So how do you capture that? You can do that digitally nowadays, yes, but how will you capture that?
Take an impression, we get a model.
I think, I haven't done a digital one, but I've just taken impressions by registration, and if you want to go further, do a Facebook record and.
Yeah. Okay, that's a standard. comes to free insiders, so where you're potentially going to be changing the occlusion or bite, you need to have diagnostic VEXA. Okay. So that is again your safety. You should have records of that. You should keep them, whether it's eventually in the long run you may think that okay, the VEXA is going to go, so just take some photographs, but keep them. That's part of your records. This is going to make a difference in your treatment planning, 100%, right? And that is important. But how do you do that? Now, digitally, I think Luca will be discussing that, isn't it? So we'll leave that for Luca. There are a few different methods. CBCT, as we were talking about, is one thing. Again, overseas, they're very, very fond of that, CBCT. And with CBCT, you can straight away triangulate that, right? You can get the joint to jaw relationship straight away. And that is articulated onto the articulators digital. Brilliant stuff. Beautiful. Really beautiful. The issue is, can you justify that CBCT? You have to be able to justify that. You need to write the whole report on that as well. Because now this is not just a segment of the arch you heard. There are other methods where you can just take the measurements, right? Frankfurt plane and take the measurements. Take a picture of that with the measurements noted down. Enter them into the software, and the software will triangulate that. It's not as accurate, but it's reasonably good. Reason being, I am a little fond of that is because our own, and do all of us do Facebook records or not?
You've done
Yeah.
a few.
It is a bit awkward, isn't it? It is a bit awkward, it can be time consuming, and you may get it wrong. Especially this RCP, right, retrograde point of view. And that's where the digital is making, it's revolutionizing the dentistry completely, really. Being one hitch is this very aspect, the CBCT or not, right? Because it's a radiation. And things are getting better, there's less and less radiation, so it may improve. But at the minute in our UK environment, it is looked with a, I would say, it's a bit skeptical at the minute whether you should go for CBT.
But we went for the CBCT course and referrals course, and they said the radiation amount is much less than an OPG. Much less than.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. True.
It's hardly equal to 3 or 4 IOPs, that's it.
Do you take OPG for every case?
But I mean, they're saying it's just equal to 3 or 4 IOPs.
Yeah, but again, they're probably talking about the segment, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's
Of
the
course,
thing. They're talking about segment. If you're talking about taking the jaw relationship or trying to capture the jaw relationship, you're going beyond just a segment. So there's things are still getting better. As I said, the radiation with every passing year, they get the new devices. They are amazing, and mostly it's the software changes. They say it's not the, I don't know how they work, but things are changing quite fast. That is making a big difference. It's going to revolutionize the dentistry. We need to understand it, right? We need to know how the occlusal factors play a role. Even if you're not too fond of taking the records, just do them whenever you can, whenever you feel the need of it, and the feel the need would mean that you are treating cases, Kennedy's classification, we were talking about Jordan, right? So, what is the Kennedy's classification? Do we remember that?
Class 4 is only
So, free in saddles, you have to be more cautious of that because you are affecting the bite. You are going to have some issues there. And you should start looking into all this. Okay. Now, this is going down the route of, depending on your expertise or your past experiences, possibly going into the complex aspects. So again, maybe don't go for those cases which are complex. Right? Start with the option, as we discussed initially, of having the implant done, right? Going through the process of planning together, of course, with whoever placing the implant, and then restoring them step by step by step. Restoration, when it comes to the occlusion, we will talk about them to some extent. Of course, restorative is slightly beyond the implants, it's a different course altogether. But we will discuss how to keep it safe, right? How to play it safe in the long run. You don't want issues with the bite and occlusion itself. So composites will be our safety net there. Identify any risk factors, okay? Plan for them. Rule them out if you can. Let the patient know. Financial implications, cost implications. Diagnostic workup will be also helping you with the consent. So you will let the patient know what's going to be eventually achieved. If there's too much bone loss and you're placing the implant deep, much below the occlusal plane eventually, so you will have long elongated crowns. Patient need to be aware of it. Diagnostic workup straight away. it's there, you can show it to them, you can talk to them. Very difficult for patients to understand what you're saying if you don't. So, OPGs, yes, they are, I think, the easiest method to go for when it comes to checking for the articulates. Right? What else, when would you take OPGs? When you're going into science. It's not always required, but it helps. Especially when we saw that case. Did you see the dome Cash had made? You see it? The thing is, it was with periapical, right? So, if you plan it well, you can measure the bone before, you've seen where you stand, what you're going to be expecting and experiencing. Then potentially you don't have to go for any kind of invasive aspects of the treatment. And at present, IRMER says these are invasive, so radiation is an issue.
You had the coffee?
We had a little mini break. I think we'll have a break in, yeah, just about. Okay, so this is again, can you see SX retainers being used? Previously, these templates were a bit more a requirement because the CBCTs required something to measure against to get you the correct measurement. But those, I think, days have gone now. In the last 4 or 5 years, many centers have now updated themselves, so you don't have to have a reference point. But these would be your reference points as well. So if you're using a CBCT in your own clinic which does not give you the correct measurement, so it has to have a reference point, then you better have a surgical stent or maybe just an SX retainer with something, a central incision in it that you can use as a reference. These SX retainers can be used as, at a later stage, as your surgical guide, guiding you to know where your implant is placed when you're exposing it. So all those steps just to help quite a lot. Ball bearing is one of the standard methods that you would have. Step wedge is pretty good, but ball bearing is another very standard method that you would use when it comes to pre-measured. So you have measured it, you know what's the diameter of the ball bearing, and you will use that in your before you're taking the radiograph. Sticky wax is an option, many dentists use that, right? Want to be safe, go for a suck down. Okay. And that is again recommended. So you want to be safe, you want to start your cases initially, go for the suck downs, keep it safe, keep it simple. Don't risk anything which could be an issue. Now, when you intraorally, there is a risk of ball bearing being, if it's ingested, it's less of an issue. If it's aspirated, you've got a problem, right? And it can easily dislodge and fall off. So you need to be careful. We've already talked about the CBCT, so I think this is not, this is probably both images replicated, isn't it? Let's change that.
So you can assess bone type with CBCT quite easily. So you
Usually
before you go, you know you're in type 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes. How do we know the type 1s? Since you've got some experience anyway, so whoever wants to put in, what is the, how do you judge the density of the bone in jaws where is type 1, where is type 2?
Generally the maxillary areas where type 2 or 3 is there, more of type 1 improvement. But then again, radiographic appearance, more
That would
improve.
definitely help.
The first feed.
If you don't have a reference point, you can be struggling with radiographs.
I know we use just the pilot process.
That's what it comes down to now, with everybody believing that. It's an awkward one, isn't it? You need to consider this step wedge. Right. It's not a good idea to wait for something which you can rule out before to be left at the time of surgery. There are things that you would find at the time of surgery which you couldn't plan before. Right? Leave those issues on. Keep them to the minimum. There will be issues when you start the surgery. You start osteotomy, there will be some problems. You should have ruled out the maximum all the other issues that you can beforehand.
So step wedge can easily be